press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from News Laundry.
This is a News Laundry podcast and you're listening to Highway on my podcast with Rocky, Mayur and Abhinandan.
We're back!
And we are with the two biggest men in Indian food and travel, Rocky and Mayur.
You usually say we are hungry, but I thought you said we were angry. Did you say angry today?
We are also angry.
We are never angry. We are calm like icicles, standing
Also with us
sharp.
is Prashant Sareen, producer,
Hi.
director extraordinaire.
Not icicles, but popsicles. We're
Icicles, cool and sharp. Popsicles are not sharp.
Like popsicles.
Popsicles are sweet. We are not sweet.
Okay, okay. Let's move on. My name is Abhinandan Sekhri. I'm trying to make sense of this
And I
conversation.
am not a popsicle.
And this is Highway on my podcast, where we take you out on the highway until you can get on the highway. We will bring the highway to you. And this episode is not, it was supposed to be, we thought we'd do Goa, but in light of what happened yesterday, where 20 of our brave soldiers were martyred, we figured since we have done a show with almost, I think, 24 episodes, if I'm not wrong, with the armed forces, and that is amongst other stuff we've done with them, but this was a show that was dedicated to the forces where we went and, well, I won't say we trained like them, but we did, Rocky and Mayur did participate in many of their activities, right from the harshest deserts to the icy peaks of the Siachen camps. We figured we'd dedicate this episode to that. So Rocky, Mayur, Prashant, we shot a show called Jai Hind with Rocky and Mayur. So let's start with the icy peaks and then we'll make our way down to the deserts and, share with our listeners the experience of training with some really young people and the kind of harsh conditions they were in. And when you saw this news on what happened up there at about 15,000 feet in China, and apparently it was armed to hand-to-hand combat, it wasn't even guns fired. Do you recall what kind of experiences you had when you had gone to the high altitude warfare training? Like what is a kind of, I would have thought that we are in 2020, any battle engagement that happens will be with guns or even smart bullets. And, we've reached to that level. And here you hear about clubs wrapped in barbed wire, people are being clubbed.
Well, yeah. Let me just start by saying I don't like the word martyred. Osama bin Laden is a martyr for Al Qaeda and ISIS and all these things. It has a very religious connotation. The army uses KIA, that's killed in action. I think that is the right word to use. Our soldiers are patriots. They are warriors. They are the greatest soldiers on earth. Definitely the best mountain soldiers in the world, which is the scenario right now that we are facing. And even the Chinese army has agreed several times that these are the best soldiers in the mountains. And we have one of the finest armies and one of the finest traditions of fighting men in the world. But I don't like the word martyred and I won't use it. You, of course, are free to use it if you like.
No, that's
but
true. Actually, I
won't.
read somewhere it has religious connotations. Yeah,
It does. It does. And I won't use it. But I want to say this, I remember being at those altitudes. We had shot at Siachen and we were at Siachen or we were, at the passes going through to the difficult situations at Hawes and we were heading to our destinations. The most difficult thing was taking even a few steps and not being out of breath. If you think 100 yards, walking 100 yards is easy. It is very easy when you're in the plains. But up in those mountains, 100 yards is like climbing a mountain. It is very, very difficult. And these men, these brave, gallant men operate in those heights. So hats off to them right at the start. It's incredible.
Prashant, you had gone to Hawes with Rocky and Mayur. You recall what altitude were you guys at? Were you at 15,000, 16,000?
Well, Hawes is not terribly, the altitude it's high, but it's not 15,000 feet. 15,000 feet actually takes, it just empties your body out of all oxygen. You're literally down to about 40% of oxygen, right? So your lungs are working, your body is working in a different zone altogether. And it's extremely difficult to do anything arduous there. Let alone trying to club your enemy to death or trying to sort of balance precariously on that tiny ledge and with the raging river down below in the gorge. I can't even begin to imagine as the sun is setting and this club fight is happening, what the soldiers must be going through and how much courage you need to be just standing there and, dealing with the enemy.
No, it's incredible. Yeah. When we were in Siachen.
Yeah, it's really quite incredible. And the cold the discomfort, you can't breathe, your nose is dry, you have these heavy layers of clothing. Of course, that said, the army has when we went to shoot, when we went up to Siachen, which is I think almost 13,000 feet, they were very careful to acclimatize us at various heights.
No, Prashant, Siachen, we started shooting at the base camp, which I think is 17,000.
No. Siachen base camp is not 17,000; it's 13,000 feet. And it's not higher than Khardungla. It's not higher than Khardungla.
In fact, we went to Khardungla. Khardungla is 18.5, and I remember, in fact, after Mayur speaks, I'll tell you, I had one very vivid memory of Khardungla.
So they have a very rigorous method of acclimatizing soldiers. It can take anywhere between 15 to 20 or 2 to 3 weeks, basically, before they go to that operating height that they're going to be operating at. So they're very, very careful. But in spite of that, I mean, somebody coming from Telangana or somebody coming from Tamil Nadu, from like zero altitude here, and going and fighting an enemy at 15,000 feet. I mean, you have to be the bravest of the brave.
Like one of the officers who was killed in action is from the south.
Right.
Colonel Babu.
In fact, the first 3 names that they gave out, one was from Tamil Nadu, one was from Telangana, and I think the other one from Madhya Pradesh.
Bihar. We had some
Bihar. That's right.
Mayur, your recollection of being up there?
I think just the primary reason we did Jai Hind was, to like share with everybody really the inside story of the training, of the tools, of the motivation and the stories of and so, I mean, here it's also important. We're talking about the conditions also, but also the rigorous training. I mean, how hard that training is. I mean, way down at sea level when we trained with the paras. We remember how the sort of training that they do, like skinny men taking in 12,000 calories worth of food just to be able to like exercise every day and all. Now take that same level of training and take it, like Prashant said, to a place where there's like 50 or 60% oxygen in there. And for them to be able to operate under those, and the sort of training that they get. I mean, I just want you guys to remember, and I think Rocky is best suited to share that. When you, not only are you fighting the enemy there, you're also fighting the environment. So up there, remember, they had training for when you get buried under an avalanche. Like, how you can rescue yourself and then rescue everybody else. So there you're battling enemy, you're battling environment, you're battling fatigue. And despite all that, these people go through all that training and then they're there 24/7, doing their duty, defending the nation. I mean, Rocky will share what it's like. I mean, just being buried under a little bit of snow for a little bit of time.
Yeah, I remember in a few episodes ago, he had told us about how horrible that feeling was. But, when we were at Khardungla, we had gone up there for one shot. For those of you who don't know, Khardungla is the highest motorable pass in the world. It's, I think, 18,500 odd feet. And I was blown away. Of course, it was very cold. You weren't there in peak summer. And I remember this Sardarji, this tall, strapping Sardarji, he was carrying a bucket, I don't know, maybe from like one little tent to the other. And he had chappals on. And I looked at him, I was like, dude, like I'm freezing. I have like 3 layers of jacket. He had Hawaii chappal, rubber chappal. And he was just, I think because we had gone in the morning because he wanted to get the sunrise shot. So he must have been brushing his teeth. And I was like, how acclimatized has this guy got? So the toughness that these guys have is indisputable. And one little story, Prashant will remember, back when we had gone to shoot the Chadar in Ladakh, Prashant, we were having dinner with the GOC there. And while we were having dinner, because, someone we knew was commanding there, a young man, I think he must have been 24. I think he was a captain or a second lieutenant. He said, "Sir, I'm leaving." It was around 9:30 at night. He said, "Okay, fine. Communicate when you're there." After he left, we said, "Where's he going?" He said, he was taking 6. They were Bofors guns, right, Prashant?
That's correct, yeah.
And there's a Swedish truck called the Scania, which tows these guns. And these 6 guns had to go across the Khardungla to, I think, South Pullu or North Pullu. And this young 24-year-old, I mean, here I would not trust my 24-year-old nephew with my car. He was taking these 6 guns across one of the most treacherous roads. And in the morning when Prashant and I started driving to Kargil, we passed that guy. That means he had been all night because, of course, those guns they negotiate those turns at a much slower speed. And it was morning when he was zipping to Kargil and we passed him. He was still on his way. I was like, my God, can you imagine the pressure these guys operate under? And yet and when he saw us, he waved, had a smile on his face, being up all night. So hats off. And what really makes my blood boil is when I see on primetime television, the buffoon sitting and jumping to fight. And I said, just go there for a week, report from there, put your studio up there, then talk.
we harm an institution when this buffoonery on television that we see night after night after night. I mean, we harm an institution by that. An institution like the Indian Army that can turn a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, 24-year-old into, a responsible young leader who's leading his men and taking equipment worth crores and crores of rupees across one of the most treacherous roads and full of beans, full of confidence. I mean, that is the kind of thing that we should be celebrating. Instead, what we see is at the senior level, these retired Fajis. I mean, stay at home, dude. It's COVID time. Just stay at home. Stay in your bedroom. Don't make noise. And they're not in touch with the reality on the ground. They know nothing of what is happening, how things have changed. If I've operated 20 years back and then I take that as a paradigm and I start spewing venom and spewing my opinion 20 years hence, I mean, I'm so out of date, yeah.
Look, I think the basic thing is when you talk about a fighting unit, if you ask the Indian Army, are you prepared to fight? What do you think the answer is going to be? Of course they're prepared to fight, yeah. It's one of the greatest armies in the world. If you ask them that question 100 times, they'll answer you 100 times. They'll say, yes, we're prepared to fight it. But the point is, are you prepared to, there must be a reason. I mean, defending your country, yes, by all means. Any encroachment into India, yes, fight, by all means, fight. But this kind of nonsense that is easily avoidable, I mean, we've not had an incident like this for 45 years. What's changed? What has happened that has changed in the last 45 years? I mean, what is this? I've heard all kinds of conspiracy theories. The Chinese, they spread COVID. Now they don't want to take the responsibilities. So they're trying to create this war with India. I mean, nobody creates war. War is devastating for everybody. And what are Chinese going to get out of it? Nothing. What is India going to get out of it? Nothing. You're going to lose hundreds of armed men because people are just keyed up for war. I mean, war is not a game, people. It's a very, very serious business. Economies will go bust. The whole country will come to a standstill. Hundreds of people will die. I mean, this is on all sides. And I'm sure the army will account themselves really well and we'll probably take 2 for 1. But what's the point? At the end of the day, there must be an objective that you're trying to achieve. What is the objective? I think the discussions on TV should be about, this is what we hope to achieve. This is what we want to get out of this. If you have a target, you want to achieve something, by all means achieve it. Then you go to war. What did we achieve in 71? Nothing. Squat.
Actually, the maturity that we went to so many of those formations, Rocky, we shot with so many soldiers, the maturity at the ground level, I mean, far exceeds anything you see in TV studios.
But the
youngest officer, nobody is saber rattling there. They understand war is a serious business. They understand that it's not just about them. It's about the nation. They understand that far better than these stupid people in TV studios. Yeah, we never heard one soldier, say, let's go to war. Let's go to war. They're ready for war. And because they are so confident and they're so ready, they're calm about it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I found amazing. And, I remember over drinks in the evening at many of the messes, I was talking to some of the youngsters and I was like, what do you make? They'd laugh. They'd say, we're trained for battle. Yeah, we'll go to battle anytime. And if that means taking a bullet, we'll take it. I mean, the calmness with which they'd think of worst case scenario. यहाँ मैं सब्जी खरीदने जाता हूँ, मैं 10 बार सोचता हूँ यार कि साला COVID है, ये हो रहा है, क्या पहन के जाना है. I mean, I was just amazed, and that young officer stands out in my mind with the tank regiment that we shot. He was from Kerala. I don't want to take names because I think we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you remember the guy. He was such a calm, cool, composed cookie. And he was telling us about maneuvers that they're supposed to do, things that he's going to do, which would very likely, take his life in such a calm way. Hats off to those guys.
Yeah, and why just the officers? I mean, every person that we met at any unit that we interacted with in the Indian Armed Forces, I mean, they're very focused, very professional, but also, like you said, very calm about their way of life. I remember when we'd finished shooting at the Siachen base camp and we were about to leave, and we had one unit that had actually spent a month and a half posting at the forward post, which is at 16,000, 17,000 feet. I mean, their conditions are so ridiculous. If you step out of your tent, you have to hook yourself to a steel pipe driven to the ground. Otherwise, the wind can take you and blow you over a cliff. And they'd come back and they were burned black by that sun at that altitude. And they just made that whole trip back. And they were like so happy and jovial. I remember we sat down to them and they were like really excited because they were going to have Maggi paranthas. And there's just that camaraderie, that jovialness. There was no this. And here, I mean,
Must
So
be
many
hard.
people, they get stuck in rush hour traffic for half an hour and stuff, and they're like, look at this, my life is so hard, I have to do this for work every day. I mean, ask those people, yeah, what their life is like.
I just want to add, people have this misconception. Everybody in India, all this juvenile saber rattling and talking nonsense. Everybody thinks, oh, soldier's job is to die for his country. No, it's not.
No.
No soldier's job is to die for his country. A soldier's job is to defend the country, is, if required, go to war for his country and decimate the opposition and the enemy and win that war for his country. That is a soldier's job. A hero is, just because you die for your country doesn't make you a hero. Every single guy who's up there fighting for his country, despite knowing what the conditions are, is a hero. And you don't waste heroes. You use them judiciously, expeditiously, sensibly when all other means have failed. I mean, these are not complicated things. This whole hyper jingoism of trying to drive the tom-tom a country into this sort of hyper mood where everybody's screaming, chanting war, 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 war. This is not. This is stupidity. This is madness. And I'm not going to. I, for one, am not going to stand for anything else except to say that before you thrust these brave men into the mouth of something which they will do, they'll do their duty every time. You have to think 100 times very, very responsibly. And these old people sitting in studios and threatening war. I mean, the Indian Army has never taken a step back and it will never take a step back. But that doesn't mean that you burn our most precious resources like this. I mean, war for a purpose, yes. War for a reason, yes. Not just for this nonsense. This is nothing. I mean, think about this very carefully, what you have to do. And if you need to go to war, have a very good reason for it. And that's I want to leave it at that, because everything is twisted these days. Whatever you say is twisted around in 100 different ways and made into something that it's not. So I'm just saying, no sane, mature nation goes to war without careful thought as to what's happening. And yes, if people have intruded into our country, if they've taken over our territory, if they are occupying our landscape, let's go to war. But let's get that clear. In the last 10 days, I've heard people like Ajay Shukla. I've heard people like, there are 2 or 3 really good people there who've been sitting and saying, look, these guys have encroached into our territory. And every single news anchor has been screaming about how they dare not, and not a step they've taken into our country, and our country is clear, and they came, but they ran away back to their own side. Well, if they ran away to their own side, then what is this? Obviously, there's been an encroachment. But now, are they sitting in our territory? What's the step going to be? So let's get the story straight. Let's get the jargon straight. Let's understand what's happening. Are they inside our territory or not? Because everybody said they're not in the last 10 days, except 2 or 3 sensible people. So were they or were they not?
And it's sad when the jingoism kind of trying to discredit the reality on the ground. But, coming back to our travels across the country with these guys, although I'm from a Fauji family, my dad's a retired army officer. Rocky's father was killed in action in the 1971 war. Mayur's father is with the Air Force, a retired Air Force officer. I didn't know, when we went to the Belgaum school, commando training school, and they said it's not unusual for every few years someone to die during training because of the extreme punishment that the body has to undergo. Do you remember when we had this lunch under a tree when these guys were jogging with their backpack and their gun? And he said, so during this 1 week, they have this 1 week of extreme training. Like, I think the whole thing was there for 3 months or a month. I forget the exact.
Yeah, it was a 35-day course when we were there. It had been shortened from 42. And it was on the way to being shortened even more.
And in those 35-day course, there's this 1 week where they average 2 hours of sleep a day. They say they learned how to sleep while even marching here. And we were sitting under that tree and they were eating, like in 10 minutes they have to eat and then get on their feet again. And they said it's not unusual for every few years someone to actually die during this kind of training because the body can't take it after a while.
No, absolutely.
Super hard. In fact, if you remember, they had, at the time we were there, there was a story about one officer who had a hairline fracture, a fracture in his leg and stuff and all. And there were like just 2 or 3 days left for the course. And he was like, if you don't finish the course, even if you're not, if you stop at the last day of the course, if you want to become an officer, you have to go back and do the course all over again. He said, I'd rather do these last 3 days, even if it means running on a broken leg, than to have to go back and do that whole course again. I mean, that's the commitment. He's like, why should I?
He had a hairline fracture. And, his friends were helping him. He had a stick on his shoulder. He was being helped by 2 other people. And that's the whole ethos of the armed forces. Yeah. I mean, these guys are just splendid. The institution it's the greatest institution. I say it so many times. Yeah. The armed forces are simply the greatest institution in this country compared to any other one. Yeah.
Nothing comes even close. Now, coming a little further down towards the desert, one of my most memorable experiences was at this desert with the gunners, the artillery. And I'm talking about this desert with just these thrushes and bushes and kikar type things. And in like 5 hours, these guys created like a dining room with a table by digging up the earth around. So there was the central earth was a table. And I was like, are you serious? And in fact, there'll be photographs of this that will accompany the newsletter for this. Man, that was, and we guys were making all sorts of jokes. And then suddenly the commanding officer came and we started trying to look respectable. Remember, guys, that was so great. Yeah.
No, and it's the temperatures. Yeah. I mean, when we were talking about Siachen and Hawes, I remember it was like -8 or -9 or -10 when we were there. And at night, the wind chill used to make it -25, -28. When we were in the desert, the daytime temperature was 49 degrees.
And how we used to bloody saddle just for one, and there was nothing tall enough to provide shade.
Nothing,
so
nothing.
Like crowd onto one chair with this behind this one seat on.
No, that's something that the army does splendidly. I mean, you have to remember, people have to be fed. If you want strong soldiers to be fighting, they have to be given good food. And the kitchen unit just moves so rapidly. I mean, we were spending most of our time with the kitchen unit, but we moved so fast. I mean, these guys got in there. They started at 10 in the morning. By 11:30, they had dug this deep trench 3 ways, covered it with a low tent. Food was cooking, fire was going. Food for 500, 600 men was being done. It was an exercise that we were following, and it was spectacular. It was all set. And they had cold coffee. Yeah, I mean how can anybody forget that, guys?
Yeah, man, that was a trip. You remember that, Mayo? And we had some beautiful sunset shots. And this very tough-looking Gabru guy who was talking to us. And when he started talking to him, he was like in his early 20s. Yeah, I was like, dude, seriously, all this time, I was, because of the kind of authority he had, I thought he must have been in my age. I was like, dude, I have nephews your age. Yeah.
Yeah, he was like 23, 24. He was a gun position officer, the GPO.
Yeah, he was Jeep, correct.
And they had this beautiful, headquarters based out of a truck, and he was the GPO. He was positioning the guns as to how they'd fire and what sort of battery they'll have. And I mean, it was a complicated process, but the way they carried it out, I mean, we were all of us, our entire unit tried to take off the base of one of the guns. You had to lift it, remove the base, and then, put the gun down. And I remember all of us trying and we couldn't do it. And these 5 guys just came and they lifted it, moved it out, and they took the gun away. And we were in shock because we thought we were like really tough, man. But these guys, the hats off to them, man. They were incredible.
Remind me, is this the place where we had that evening dinner around the fire and everybody told stories?
Yes.
Including all of us with the crews and the jokes and stuff and all.
There was much singing also.
No, what you're talking about, the sit-down dinner with the senior officers and all, that was another one.
No, not
the one at the bonfire when everybody told lots of stories, and one of our crew members told a very risque story that left.
No. That was another one. Yeah.
That was another.
This one was when that guy sang a Haryanvi song about singing to his family before he left, and I think everybody was sort of had a tear in the eye. At least I had a tear in my eye.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing, wherever we went, I mean, with very little, they make themselves comfortable and they live in style with very little. I mean, their style is not a shoonsha, heavy duty kind of thing, 4-poster beds kind of thing. But it's in simplicity, there is a certain orderliness and there's cleanliness and, it's just set up nicely. It's just like, this is what we have, this is what we'll make do with. And they do a spectacular job of it. I mean, in so many messes that we stayed in, even the Siachen base camp, for instance, it was so simple. It was just a little tiny, in the room, you had one almirah, you had a few hangers, you had one table, a tiny table by 3 feet by 3 feet table with green felt on top of it, which gave it a completely different look. And you had, 2 beds and it was such a clean, nice set up room. And all that they do to their mess or whatever they do, wherever they go, with very little, they're able to rustle up, so much. They're able to do so much. They don't stand there complaining, "Arey yaar, ye nahi tha to ye nahi hua." That's just not in their gene.
Remember they had a mess. Where was it that they had a mess inside? They'd taken an old plane and converted the inside into a mess.
We can't say where it was, but this is where the maroon berets are the para commandos. So it's the most elite force. So speaking of creating something out of nothing, there was like this retired
Packet Fairchild aircraft.
हाँ, तो
Right.
उसका
Oh,
उन्होंने
geez, we even
they had
remember.
made the staircase that goes up to the aircraft and उस aircraft का जो basic क्या कहते हैं shell fuselage के अंदर इन्होंने they had made a bar, a sit down dinner. So it was like inside. It was the most cool thing I've ever come across.
Yeah, in fact, when we were going up, one of the guys said, "This is the only aircraft in the world where before you come in, you have to have one drink."
Yeah.
That's the great usage. Yeah, I mean, so if you don't have, let me put it this way: if you don't have a good kitchen with good strong food, you're going to have a weak army. They're not going to be able to fight after 1 or 2 days. If you don't have perfect hygiene, you're going to have a sick army. They're not going to be able to fight after 1 or 2 days. If you don't have discipline and organization, nobody will know what to do when the shelling and the bullets start flying. You're going to have a disorganized army, you're going to lose. If you don't have a proper system in place and a SOP for everything, people will forget what needs to be done when the bullets start flying. So the army will get disorganized and lose. These things are very basic things for any professional army. You have to cover these things. So it doesn't matter if people are sleeping in the ground, and many people were sleeping in the ground that day. I remember, in the desert, it was freezing cold at night, and people were sleeping in these 3-foot trenches with a little drape on top of them. Even the trenches that they dug were neat and tidy and in a pattern so that there would be minimum loss of life in case the enemy opened fire. So everything has a standard operating procedure, also known as an SOP. And all these SOPs are followed. And if morale goes down, you'll have an army that doesn't want to fight. So these things have to be kept in mind. So what the army needs is food, shelter, clothing, proper equipment, high morale, the best of what they can get so that they can go and fight effectively in the best possible manner. And nobody should forget that.
And one, moving from the artillery and the high altitude to when we were shooting with the cavalry. So this is also in a desert state. And this is where the horses are. I think this is the only mounted cavalry unit in the country. Am I right? Or is there any other? This is the only one.
I'm in the world now.
This is the only one, and that's where I was born. It is the greatest place in the world.
So
I was born in the military hospital right there.
So we went back to the place where Rocky was born and shot to the only mounted cavalry unit in the world. So they are trained on horses. It's this horses, and here Rocky had just recovered because, as you know, if you heard our past podcast of when we had gone to Meghalaya, Rocky had broken his leg while playing basketball, jumping around, thinking he's a teenager again. And so we had to do the Northern Command with Rocky on the wheelchair and Mayur pushing him.
Eastern Command. Eastern Air Command with
Eastern
Rocky in the wheelchair.
It was like
I had to do all the pushing, so it's burnt in my memory.
Yeah, so all the piece to cameras, all the sequences were done with Rocky in a wheelchair with Mayur.
With the plastic baggie around the thing when it was going to be rain and stuff. I remember.
Yeah, so Rocky's knee ankle had just about recovered when he was shooting the cavalry, and Rocky as a 100 kilo ka, he looked like a healthy boy. So I said, "यार एक sequence आप घोड़े पे करना है." तो मयूर तो फुदक के चढ़ गया घोड़े पे. Rocky's knee ankle was still not properly healed. So I said, अब ये घोड़ा है 10 फुट का, तो कैसे चढ़ेंगे? तो I said, Rocky तू चढ़, तू मेरे टांग पे अपना step on my leg and then step on the horse. So Rocky looks at me, he says, "Look, my ankle."
240 kilo.
Are you sure? Because if your leg wobbles and I fall, my leg will break again. I'm not the guy who's going to be doing the commando course on a broken leg. I said, "Tu fikar mat kar, Rocky, yaar main baith gaya with my leg." The Rocky stepped on my leg. I didn't anticipate it. Pura bhari bharkam. My leg wobbled and Rocky fell. My God, the poor guy. I remember the pain, and he looked at me. Remember, Rox?
What could I say?
How did he finally get you on the horse?
Then I jumped up and crawled over. And I mean, I jumped and lay on my belly and then put my feet in the stirrup. I would have done that in the first place, but you were like insisting. You were like, "Arey, don't worry, मैं अपनी जान दे दूँगा, लेकिन मैं हिलूँगा नहीं."
It almost came to both those things.
Both those things happened.
इसकी टांग भी गई, मेरी जान भी गई.
Actually, listen, 61 Cavalry was also the place was the only case where I encountered insubordination in the Indian Army.
Yeah, that guy's hair, no?
No, I'm talking about the horse when I sat on it and told it to go and it refused to move. And then it turned around and walked the other way. We started the shot, Rocky and all the other horses went one way. My horse first refused to move and then turned around and went the other way.
Yeah, and I remember we were so happy because, they give these horses a feed, which is a combination of sprouted wheat germ and a couple of other things. And Mayur and I were eating that stuff here. It was really nice, man. I mean, it was filthy. It had a little bit of horse dung in it, but it was nice to eat. We ate quite a few fistfuls.
खाना दिखना चाहिए तुम दोनों को. चाहे घोड़े का ही हो.
Listen, incidentally, that place also, of all the places we shot at, with all the units we shot at all across the country on Jai Hind, that had the most unimpressive lunch. I remember they had.
But it had such a fancy bar, yeah, with the polo.
The
That carpet was
original,
in the shape of polo.
the original polo bar.
The
Everything.
bar at the Hyatt is called the polo bar. The bar at Dehradun present is called the polo bar. This is the original polo bar.
This is the original polo bar.
Yeah, it was lovely. They had this huge layout of a polo field.
Yeah,
On
on
the,
the
the
carpet.
carpet was designed like a polo ground, and you had these little dummy players, and people would make polo strategies, etc. Because that is one of the things that the 61 Cavalry does. It sort of plays polo matches and does dressage and does tent pegging, etc. And man, those pegging guys, yeah, I mean, at a full gallop,
Yeah.
you hold, you hold a sort of sword in your teeth, and you have a lance in your hand, and you have a pike tucked into your trouser, into your kamarband, and you come down at full speed. You pluck the first tent peg on the ground with a spear. You take the sword out of your teeth and pluck the second tent peg out of the ground, and then you take the pike out of your kamarband and pluck the third tent peg out of the ground.
Yeah, that was amazing, man.
At full gallop. And of course, tent pegging. I mean, cavalry, the old days where horses used to go to war. What a unit the cavalry used to be. The
And Rocky
glory.
with full gallop, and they had their pagadi on, huh? Remember, they had
Yeah.
that very
Always.
stylish pagadi, which that also didn't fall off while they did this whole thing, man.
I mean, it was incredible. The guy was under the horse's belly when he was taking out the final peg. He was not only like tilt. I mean, with the spear, he was tilting, and with the sword, he was 90 degrees, and with the pike, he was like almost touching the ground while doing that. And every time he picked those pegs, man, that was incredible. What a beautiful thing to watch.
Now, from the cavalry, I'd just like to go to the Eastern Air Command. This is in Shillong. We had one of the most, other than the IMA, where we shot this really fancy dinner. And Rocky's got a picture of me because on the walls they have these mounted bulls and stuff. So he's got a picture of me where I'm in the foreground, and behind me, because it's a low angle shot, there's the bull. So you can't see the bull, but you can see the horns. So it looks like the horns are coming out of my head. You can remember that picture, Rocky?
I remember that
picture?
shot. Yeah.
Send me that. I don't have a copy of that picture. I remember he showed it to me. You were sitting on the table and clicking. But at the Eastern Air Command, just to give you an idea of the discipline Rocky is talking about, while they were so warm to us, they were wonderful. They opened their hearts and their messes out for us. After we were shooting the sequence of the formal dinner, the Bada Khana, I forget what it's called in the Eastern Air Command, where everyone's liveried. Rocky and Muir had to come dressed formally in polished shoes. Now, because I wasn't on camera.
Rocky tied his bow tie onto his wheelchair.
No, you guys were wearing ties. You didn't wear a tie.
No,
I
I
think
didn't.
Rocky wore a tie. It was like, it had to be formal, but you had polished shoes. Now, I was in my track pants and Keds because I'm not in front of camera. I'm directing. So after we shot the dinner, I was like, now I'll eat. So very politely, the officer said, you have to be dressed in formals to eat here. We'll serve you the finest food, but we've laid a table for you in the other room because to eat
Not
here,
over here.
you have to be in formals. So I was like, okay. So then I walked to the other room. They had laid out a lovely dinner for me, but I could not, in my track pants and Keds, eat in the main hall. I was like, that's discipline, man.
They're really big on tradition, and I think that's really good, because how do you pass on a culture from one generation to the next? I think it's those traditions and it's those little nuances of how to behave and what to do and so on. I mean, those are the kinds of things which make for continuity, right, in any institution. So, like, for instance, even when we were shooting with the Para Commandos, after that Packard, that aircraft bar that we went to, when we went for the meal itself, the way the meal was announced, everyone trooping in behind the CO, everyone having a designated seat at the table, and then everyone keeping their hands in their lap until the CO picked up his fork and his knife. It's like it was clockwork, and it's a meal that you can't. I mean, it's a very formal meal. I don't think so. It satiated our appetites that evening after a long day, but just sitting there and going through the motions, you begin to realize that I mean, how do you take a boy from a small town and turn him into a gentleman officer, or officer gentleman, whatever sequence you put that in? I mean, it's so remarkable, that transformation of somebody is so remarkable.
Yeah,
fact,
and
one more
because
Only in an institution like the armed forces.
One more tradition that Prashant is talking about of not being able to satiating your food. The senior officer sits at the head of the table and everything comes in courses. So when he lifts his spoon is when you lift your spoon. And when he finishes his course, you have finished your course, whether you have finished it or not. The next course will be served. So you have to pace. So imagine this, when you're having your soup, you can't have finished your soup and you're sitting and staring at him. It's rude because then it looks like you have to wait for your next. And if he's finished it, they're going to pick up your soup because the next course will come. So you have to pace your pace of eating with that senior officer's pace of eating. So you guys finish at the same time. So the next course comes.
So I think we need to explain it. So when you have a big dinner, it starts with a toast for the president. And some people who don't drink get a little bit of, soft drink or juice in a small glass. And there is a head chair. The head chair is, occupied by the senior most officer there. He plays the role of a president and he'll raise the toast and he'll say to the president, and then everybody cheers to the president who's the sort of institutional head of the armed forces of India. And then a toast is said to the president, and then you start and then you sit down, and that's when the first course begins. And then when the head of the chair, food is brought out, because it's a very formal dinner, it's done in a very specific seating standard style. And when the food is brought out and it's placed in people's plates, and only when everybody has been served, if there's like 100 people, after all 100 have got food on their table, that's when the head of the table or the person sitting in the president's chair will take the first bite. And that's when the eating begins. And you can't talk across the table. So if the table is 2 feet wide, very narrow, and you cannot touch the other person across you, you can't talk to them because it's rude. So you have to talk to the person either your left or your right. And you start eating. And then when he finishes the first course, you finish it, it's cleared. Second course comes, third comes. So it's not really... And the first course that we were there was a small piece of bread. The second course was a little soup. And so on and so forth. So, the food doesn't have to be fancy, but the methodology is beautiful. That tradition is wonderful.
And that which what Prashant was saying, even a good commanding officer, if there's a little bit of soup left and he sees someone's soup has come a little late, he won't finish that soup until that person's last sip is there. Then he finishes the soup, so they finish it together and the next course comes. It's really beautiful tradition.
That's the real intermittent eating diet. When you sit down for a fancy dinner with 500 people and you have to wait.
And the super kindness is, I was so hungry when we started the food. I was dying. And I realized that the portions will be small. So I told all the boys around me, I said, listen, you guys, man, if you have any food that you're not going to eat, please give it to me. And they were so kind that every time something came, they would put a little piece out into my plate. So I really ate well, yeah. And thanks to the army. I will always appreciate that generosity.
Right. Now, other than the eating, these guys also trained with the forces. Rocky, remind me, where was it? I mean, unless we can't. But what unit was it where you shot, like we started these little Glock type guns and then moved on to the MMG till we moved to that big ass thing that Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that whole magazine.
Yeah. We first started with the commandos, where we trained, taking our guns, running a kilometer circle, then jumping into the water, crossing the water with our guns held above our head so that you would get them wet, then going under the barbed wire while the machine gun was firing overhead. And that is really scary. I mean, you have to hear the bullets going over your head. It's a totally different feeling here. And then getting out and then running another half a kilometer. I, of course, was exhausted, so they carried me on a stretcher.
In fact, that is also, it's not just carried you. They had to simulate that if someone gets injured, how do they carry someone? So they wanted to volunteer. Who will volunteer as the injured person who will get carried. So Rocky volunteered.
Rocky was the brave volunteer.
And they were like, isko chhod ke koi bhi aur de do, because we have to finish this obstacle course. This 110 kilo guy will make us slow us down, but they carried me all the way. And then we had that really interesting obstacle course that Mayur and I were doing, where we went up, 25 feet up on railings, then we crawled down on a net, then we went ahead, then we did this
rope.
Sort of...
You have to swing across some more.
Jungle gym, where you had to do pull-ups and crawl yourself across. So I, of course, cheated, and when nobody was looking, tried to run under it, but the instructor caught me and said, "Tumne nahi kiya." And I was like, "Sir, dekho, main kar bhi nahi sakta." And then Mayur was trying really hard, and our team was all waiting for Mayur to finish because I had cheated, so he was left. Then I went and put him on my shoulders, and then he was able to do it.
I remember that.
Monkey bars.
And they gave us a big cheer for it, even though I had cheated and Mayur had sort of got a little bit of help. And then we went forward and we swung across the ditch and we jumped in, we went under the water, went into the pipe. It was a really interesting obstacle course. But we did finish it, Mayur. Good for us,
yeah.
Except for that pull-up thing.
They were a lot more respectful, because I remember when we did the opening piece to camera, I think we have a photograph of that. It's pretty like Rocky and I in the forefront, and then at the back there's all these guys all made up and stuff, and you can tell any one of them is very capable of killing you with a thought. And they were very standoffish, and then by the end of it, when we finished and stuff, we got cheers and all because I think they were really surprised. I don't think anybody else had done that before. Like actually, like crawling under live wire while live fire is on and being able to complete.
And there's like real bullets being fired, guys. Just so you know. But listen, where did we do that big gun firing, Rocky? I'm getting confused. You know the one I'm talking about? You were lying down and this, that gun Ani carries with the whole magazine, like
Jodhpur. We were with the Garud commandos.
Yeah, man, what a gun that was, huh?
The Garuds are the commandos of the Mayur. You remember the Garuds?
The Air Force commandos. They're the Air Force commandos, and we went and we trained with them. Yeah, hand-to-hand combat. I think that was my favorite memory of there is the hand-to-hand combat and stuff they were training. And they can like just take a gun out of your hand and point it back at you in like less than a second. There, remember that guy?
And give you a slap.
Yeah, and give you a slap.
So both Mayur and I volunteered thinking that we won't let go of the guns. And we were holding them really tight. Both of us got a slap, and the next thing we knew was the guy was holding a gun. And we were like, what the hell is this? Yaar? Ek second bhi nahi laga.
So there they have these huge guns where you lie down, and of course I'm not very fond of guns, so I didn't go and shoot. But both of you shot that big ass gun, man.
MMGs, baby, medium machine guns. We were at the firing range, and they had the MMGs lined up, and we let go with them. I mean, there were 10 targets. By the time we finished firing the full sort of roll of the MMG, the targets had been cut into half. There was nothing left in the target zone. That is a lethal weapon. I think it fires like some ridiculous number of bullets here, like 500, 600, 800, 900, something like that bullets per minute.
If you touch the trigger at any given time, 4 go. So it's like, if you just touch the trigger once and release, it's like 4 bullets have gone. So if you keep it there, they're like 16 bullets going every 2 seconds or some shit like that. He had given some calculation, I don't recall.
Yeah, it's some big number.
Miniature cannon shells, yeah, the bullets themselves, they're like 4-5 inches long.
Yeah, they're huge bullets. Yeah, one of those would like take
one of them can easily cut down a man.
Yeah, and that's, people are thinking about shooting all these things, but they're not thinking about advancing when these things are shooting at you, because you have to remember it's a two-way street. So these guys, I mean, when they face that kind of fire, knowing what these weapons can do, those are fearsome weapons. And I mean, we used their pistols in their pistol firing range. Then we went to the AK range, the automatic weapon range, where we were firing the INSAS rifles. And that was great. We learned how to take apart the INSAS and put it back together blindfolded. You remember that, Mayur? You remember our timing?
Yeah. I remember we took them apart, but I don't remember the timing. Did we do okay?
We did okay. We did like under a minute. Yeah, I think, one of us did it in like 52 seconds and the other one did it like in 65 or something like that. But we finished it in respectable times. I mean, they were, of course, doing it like 12 seconds and all that stuff.
We aren't just about fast food.
But at that same place, I remember, like I said, I'm not too fond of guns, but they also have this, for the beginners, this course where you're simulating getting out hostages into this house, which they have this make-believe house with these targets, fake targets, like they have the child and the parent, and then the kidnapper or the terrorist. So, I mean, of course, it is to make sure that you don't shoot the wrong person. And they give you these guns, which are these with pressure, and they shoot
paintball guns.
So I took the paintball gun and went through that course. I think I shot a few kids.
Yeah. You did. I'm sure you did. But that was really impressive because for one exercise, I was the captive. And I was sitting in a room surrounded by 2 guys and 3 other people. And before I knew it, these guys were in and all the captives were dead. And I was like, yeah, bach gaye. And it was fabulous. Yeah. I mean, the training that these guys go through is really professional, really incredible, and really fantastic. Yeah. So, I mean, I've always, every time I've interacted with the armed forces, and we were so lucky to do Jai Hind with them. I think we did, how many episodes of Jai Hind did we do, guys? Do you remember?
We did 24 episodes.
24 episodes, and I think we did like two episodes in 3 or 4 places. So we did over 20 units of the Army, Navy, and Air Force here.
Yeah.
That was a real honor, and a real sort of, I mean, I've never had such a glorious time in my life. I mean, that's the only word I can use for it, Even when we go back to, let's say, the Ghatak course that we did in North Karnataka, I don't know if you guys remember when we did the Ghatak course. And they have that Lido jump where you dive into the water, swim, climb.
In fact, we put that in we put photographs of that. And you guys, in one of the past newsletters, It's there, Rocky doing that Lido jump in L position.
Yeah, we'd spoken about it. And when Mayur and I both successfully completed the Lido jump with great difficulty and personal risk, and we came out and the general who was observing us was like, "Arey, if these boys can do it, yeah, then all our boys can do it easily. We have to make it more difficult." And we were like half dead over there. We were like, "Sir, kya baat kar rahe ho, sir?"
But before we wind up, with a huge thank you to our forces for doing what they do in spite of many odds, some physical, some emotional, and some, for a nation that is grateful, though I'm sure there are many people who are not grateful. But in spite of all that, those who do it, before we wind up, you guys want to give us one last anecdote each from these 24 glorious episodes that we had?
For me, one of the biggest highlights was being on the aircraft carrier. We were really lucky, because we had a lot of time. We had requested the Navy to be on the aircraft carrier, and the Navy was doing a firing demonstration, and they had invited press from all over the world and senior officers from friendly countries to take them out on the aircraft carrier and show them how the aircraft carrier works and do a demonstration for them. And we were on board. Luckily, for 2 nights we were there, and we shot 2 episodes on the aircraft carrier. And that was the greatest sort of privilege of my life. In fact, I was, talking to the senior officer there, and I was telling him that I've been firing guns and I've really enjoyed firing different ones. And he said, "What's the biggest gun you fired?" And I fired, and I said, "Well, I shot a bazooka." And he said, "Oh, nothing. We'll make you fire a big gun. Come on." And I was so thrilled because I was like, "My God, I'm going to fire one of these giant guns on the aircraft carrier." And he took me to the engine room, and then we all sat there, and then there was a countdown, and he said, "On 0, get ready. You see this button?" I was like, yeah. And he was like, "Okay, on 0, you press it." And I went 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And I pressed the button. And he was like, "Okay, now go." And I was like, "What?" You're like, "What? You're 5 stories underneath the gun. You're not going to feel it or hear it. It's a giant city, the aircraft carrier. But you just fired the biggest gun of your life. Now go." And I was like so cheated. I was like, "Ye kya hua? Kuch dikha bhi nahi, kuch phata nahi." But it was a thrill, yeah.
You, Prashant?
For me, it's just, every time I think of our trips on Jai Hind, I'm just filled with gratitude for how openly they just welcomed us into their formations. They were welcoming, they were open with us, they gave us information, they gave us time. It was just such a humbling experience that these people have so many important things to do, and yet, they're interacting with us. And they literally, it wasn't superficial, it wasn't like, "Ha, theek hai, and we have to be nice to them." They were keen to talk to us and explain to us things and what they do and how they do and so on, So for me, it was always like, it was a feeling of deep, deep gratitude for having gone into their sacred space and been received there, and spent 2 days or 2 nights with them and come back. But I remember this, for me, I think one of the things that really stands out in my head was again from the Siachen base camp. This was just a typical evening. We were just hanging around near the helipad, and this message came that some porter I think he had severed a finger or something while rappelling up some supplies for the post, and he needed evacuation. And it was already turning dark and the clouds were rolling in. And I remember how quickly this Army Aviation Corps pilot, he jumped into his Chetak and he just flew out here. It was already 5:36. It was going to get dark. This was an extremely risky operation he took. But he knew that if he didn't get there in time and get this porter out, not even a soldier, but a porter out, he'd probably lose his finger for good, his thumb for good. And he just flew out, and, he returned in about 40 minutes with this boy, and it was already turning dark by the time he landed, which was a very, very risky operation he did. But he just did it. And it just struck me that these guys are just amazing. Yeah. It's like they just know what needs to be done, and they just go out and do it. They're not intellectualizing the whole affair. We can understand a lot of things intellectually, but when you have to go out and do something, that's quite another thing.
Yeah.
He just went out and did it. And, and then went and had his dinner and had a drink and had a laugh in the mess. And it was all in a day's work, these little incidents sort of stick in my mind. I don't remember his name, but he's such a remarkable youngster who just got into his Chetak, flew out. And, he had to do this alone because he was bringing a person back with him. And at that altitude, the Chetak can't fly 3 people. So there was nobody else. He was flying out alone to that post and coming back with this porter. And he did that. And while he was going, he carried 2 canisters of kerosene also for the post. Why not?
Yeah.
Do that as well. They're remarkable people there. They're just remarkable.
Muniz?
So I never do like doing one. So I'll do 2 quick ones. One beautiful memory is Rocky and I sitting at the end of one of the nights that we were out in the aircraft carrier, and we just sat at the back of the aircraft carrier. And was it the poop deck, Rock, or either the quarter deck or the poop deck? We just sat there.
Yeah, poop deck.
Yeah, and the giant propellers of the carrier were like agitating all these the plankton in the ocean. And we had these brilliant bursts and explosions of like pink light and green light. It was almost like bombs going off under the water in this fluorescent wake of the carrier. And then the second memory, really beautiful memory I have, is we'd finished dinner up in at the Siachen base camp. We stepped out, and I remember looking up because I love mountaineering. I love the mountains, as does Prashant. And I just remember that sky with just clear, clean, cold mountain air and a million stars. And I remember just stopping and looking up at that. So those are beautiful memories. Now, a lot of the people in the armed forces and all of them, they serve under such hard conditions. They don't have this luxury and the comfort of coming home to like their family and their kids and seeing them every night and having the pleasure of anything except a very hardcore routine. And these are the small things that they have to. The camaraderie with their colleagues, their brothers in arms. This is what they have to draw on. This is what keeps them going day after day when they stuck in these remote places in conditions that you wouldn't put your worst enemy in. And they do it willingly and they do it happily. So my salute to them, and my prayers go out to everybody who is serving our nation in the defense of our country. And that's all I have to say.
No, it's fantastic. Can I just add one more before you go, Niku? Very quick one.
Sure, go Rocks.
With the Ladakh Scouts, I don't know if you remember this, we had to do a shoot where there was a long rope hanging and we had to swing from one wall to the other wall. And these really strong Ladakhi boys, I mean, they were like, 55 kilos each, fit as a horse. I mean, they came running, jumped up, caught the rope, swung across. And I was too cold, so I was wearing my big, thick gloves. And I jumped and grabbed the rope and swung across. And when I landed, I looked at my hands and my glove was torn. It was so cold that the glove had become sort of frozen. And holding that rope, had just ripped the glove open. And the rope was frozen as well. And it must have been like -10. And these guys were just handling it. Their hands and feet are like leather. And I turned to Mayur and I said, Mayur, you'll need gloves. And before I could, either of us could react, Mayur had jumped and grabbed the rope and swung. And the whole chunk of his palm had come off here. Mayur, you remember that?
Yeah.
A big, thick chunk of skin from his palm just ripped off with that cold thing here. And of course, he couldn't fall, so he swung across. But when he reached, it was a horrible injury. And that's, sort of how hard their lives are. So before you say anything about a soldier, before you make fun of anything or before you grudge him anything that he gets, put yourself in that situation, boss. You won't even last one day just in training. Forget about lasting in a fight. I mean, that is day after day after day, the mental, physical, emotional trauma that you go through. And it is trauma. These boys are trained for it. They are the finest of this country. They are the greatest individuals that this country produces. And hats off to each and every single one of them, each and every single time. I cannot say it enough.
The one, which is not a very action-oriented memory, but just to give you an idea, when you're shooting, especially as the producer or director, you're always stressed. You may have a clumsy anchor who'll break a bone, or you'll have some, disaster strike and, your footage will get erased, or you lose some equipment, or you lose a mic. And in those days when, we were still struggling, we weren't, so established as a production house. We were shooting with the commandos, and I remember we had to move from one place to the other, from shooting across the lake. And I remember it started raining also. So there was rain happening and there was shooting. Then from that, we had to move to the steeple course, kind of that obstacle course. Then we had to move to where you had to jump. So it was very swift from one place to the other. And whenever you shoot like that, especially over such a huge area where there are forests, there are lakes, you end up losing equipment. And I'd always be running around. I'd say, I'd tell Sunil, have you checked this? I'd tell our wonderful poet assistant that, have you checked this? So do you remember this major? And you said he has the look of a killer in his eye. Do you know the guy with light eyes?
Yes.
Para commandos. So I won't take his name. And he said, you're always very stressed. What's the problem? I said, if I just lose any equipment here, the shoot will get ruined. So he looked at me very calmly. He said, I guarantee you, even if there is one screw of your tripod missing, before you leave this, I will have it found. And this is not one house. He said anywhere on this bloody campus, I don't know how many acres. He says, if there's anything that is missing, you will not leave this area without every single screw of your equipment. So relax.
Or we delayed because of it.
So, and the confidence with which he said it was so reassuring. And I was like, that's the kind of reassuring sentiment and emotion that these guys can invoke in you. So yeah, thanks to them and good on them for doing what they do. I just hope we as a nation deserve their commitment. On that note, we will be back next week with another state. Hopefully things would have calmed down by then. Hopefully we would not have lost any more lives. And hopefully our braves would be guarding our country, but would not have to lose their lives doing so. So until then, we will leave you. And should we give them a food court?
We cannot leave without the food court. If the army has their SOP, we have our SOP.
Well said.
We will eat whatever the army gives us, whether it is a dry piece of bread or a grand meal of many courses. We will tip our hat and raise a cheer and salute the Indian Armed Forces.
Mayonnaise.
The nationalists now say Hindi chini no bye bye. And yet when no one's looking, you'll probably find them eating YY. Noodles.
That's Nepalese as far as I know.
Yes. YY is, by the way, Nepalese. But right now they're also out of favor, so it's fine.
Right now, yeah, we are having trouble there also. You put yourself in harm's way, be it a desert, a forest, or a hill station. Be safe and hope you're back with those you love. Thanks from a grateful nation. On that note,
Wow. Prashant, tu bhi aaj bol hi de yaar ek food court.
I'm speechless. That is my food court.
You're also bald. Your hair has got fuzz now. A little bit of fuzz you've got.
Say I'm a cadet. This is the crew cut.
I wish I were a cadet.
Prashant, you can say I'm speechless. I have nothing of note. But if I could say something beautiful, the forces would get my vote.
You are my man, Mayura.
Yahi main kehna chahta tha. Prashant was going to say this only.
How did you read my mind? Ekdam.
It's easy when your mind is not covered.
Easy, there's no hair in the way. It's much easier to read your mind without the interference of the...
Mayur is going to be doing the food court for 2 people now.
So until next week, thank you, gentlemen. Good night. Sleep well.
Good night.
Toodaloo, old chaps. Catch you next week. Bye-bye. Ta-ta.
Bye.
All the News Laundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to News Laundry. Help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs, and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.